How are you doing? This is Alex, and welcome to another episode of Valet Stories. Yes, I'm that valet guy, and what we're going to do, I get a lot of questions about what goes on and how do you do certain things with valet parking, and this is the time, kind of like a AMA, which is Ask Me Anything, and I'll take the time to discuss some of the things that are going on deeper within the valet world, or even not deeper, some of the simple questions. So let's start the first one out. First question, let's put this out here, comes from Xabra. I have a simple question, or a stupid question actually. Back in the day, back in the 80s and the 90s, what would valets do when times got slow? Would you swing nunchucks or butterfly knives or juggling keys or smoking or just whatever weird things valets did while they're bored? You know what? That's an excellent question. The reason why, obviously right now, my number one complaint from my restaurants and accounts that we have, valets during idle time, this is what they're doing. And that gets on management's nerve. They hate valets always looking. They're on Instagram, they're watching YouTube videos, hopefully my videos, and some of these other things that are out there. But we didn't have this stuff when I was a valet back in the 80s and the 90s. Well, I wasn't a valet in the 80s, but in the 90s I was. Cell phones were new to the market probably in 95, that most people, it was affordable enough that a college student could afford one. But what did we do beforehand? And that's actually a really good question. I'll give you 3 examples that were really funny. We had this one valet, and I'm not going to say his name, but he was a volunteer firefighter. And what he did, he used to listen to the CB radio scanner while he was valet parking. So if it was slow, he was constantly listening to the scanner. And I get a phone call one night, and it's from the management of the restaurant. And they're like, your valet just left, and he still has a whole bunch of cars in this lot. So I call him. He doesn't answer. He finally calls me back. I actually have to go over, or we send someone over there. And he calls us back, and he's like, oh, there was an emergency situation on the scanner, and I ended up leaving my post to go help a car accident victim or something like that. So I get over to the parking lot. By this time, it's maybe 8 o'clock, 8:30 at night. And what happens, the police show up because this random person just showed up to an accident scene because he was a volunteer firefighter in 3 counties over, and he's listening to the police scanner, and when something happened, he was very close to the scene, so he showed up. When you have a municipality that has a fire department like City of Atlanta, the police department, paramedics and everything like that, you're not supposed to show up to a scene. And he did, and he actually got in trouble for it. So that's one of the weird things that happened while he was sitting around bored. So no, he wasn't juggling nunchucks or anything like that. The next thing, this is something I used to do personally. Now, this is going to be kind of nerdy, but since we didn't have a lot of stuff to do, and I used to read a lot. I actually read my school books. I used to read my school books during time when it got slow for valet parking. The other thing I used to do, now this is crazy, I used to memorize cars. I got to the point where I used to get so bored in a given night, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to memorize all of the cars. So I'd memorize each and every car, and if I'm parking 30, 40, 50 cars, I was good. It's like a game of memory, or the cards where you flip them over and everything like that, and you have to remember which one is in what position. Well, I used to do that. I used to be like, well, that's gentleman, he's driving a red Ferrari, he's whatever the suit is, or let's say he's driving a white Buick, because we used to have a lot of company cars come in. So we had to relate them to what they were wearing. So a lot of times I would say, okay, he's wearing a polka dot shirt, I know he belonged in the gold Camry. Or I would see something else and the guy has boots and I know, okay, he came out of the Jeep Wrangler. So these are different things that I did. And throughout the night, I used to test myself, and I was usually pretty good for about 50, 60, maybe even 70 cars. But when it got up to about 80 or 90 cars, I would start losing it a little bit, and I used to start forgetting some of the cars. But throughout the night, I could do 50 cars easy and remember. And all that did was improve my tips. So throughout the night, if it got slower, I'd just go over and just go point at that car and be like, okay, that person had a red shirt, that had a blue dress, this. So every single car in the lot I knew. So what would happen, the window's there, and I could see them getting up from the table and getting ready to come out the restaurant because they've just paid their bill. So what do? I run, go get their car, start it up, pull it up, have the heat going, have the air going, have the doors open, and they are impressed. And that's how I did well as a valet. And they would give me 5, 10, 20 bucks per car. So you wonder how valets made money in a given night. I did a little extra effort. I don't want to say a lot of the valets are lazy nowadays, but they just want to kind of, just, you give me the money and all that stuff. But what did you do? And this is honestly a question I ask my valets. What do you do to deserve more than $2 or $3? And these are things that I would do. Of course, I would pull up the car, and still people would stiff you and stuff like that, but you take the good with the bad. But overall, I would do an excellent job at making sure these cars were pulled up, the doors were open, and I memorized all the cars. Now, here's a nerdy thing that I used to do afterwards. Before Instagram, before the TVs and all the cell phones and videos and all that, if it was slow on a given night, I used to bring a little portable TV, and it was a Sony Watchman. It was either a Sony Watchman, or we had this little TV that had the antenna on it that you would pull up and hopefully get over-the-air reception. And I used to watch Martin or different things like that when it got to a slower night. So that was pretty funny, and I guess that was pretty much equivalent to what was going on there. But that's an excellent question on what valets used to do when we used to get bored. I got a lot of comments on, I love the piston clock, I love the engine block table, is it a Chevy block that's under the glass? When I did my video in my garage, I love doing automotive art. What that is I recycle parts and I make things. I'm very creative when it comes to that. And that the block that you see, that's actually a Range Rover 4.6 liter block, V8 block that actually has a cracked block. So I took it, I actually didn't have to weld on the feet. The feet were actually, I just used the screw points and put these screws in and got myself feet for it. And so I was able to elevate the height. I ordered a piece of glass, obviously, and then I welded on the pistons. Now, what makes it difficult? Part of the engine block is aluminum, the other part's steel, and you cannot weld aluminum to steel. So I had to do these little feet that were actually steel to steel, so then I can weld them on that way. But you cannot weld aluminum to steel. And no, I don't weld. One of my friends does, but this is the lesson we learned really quickly. So that's my engine block. The piston is actually out of a E36 M3. I think it's a S50 engine. So that was powder coated, and I just put a little clock in there. Now, what else I have in this garage? I have a Lamborghini Murcielago GT carbon fiber rotor as a clock. I have Mercedes-Benz, probably W124 springs, and I made them into lights that are around my TV, so I'll show you that next. What else did I do? All my little knobs are actually cars. My sink is a Porsche sink. It's actually a 55-gallon drum that I had custom painted, and then I put all the decals on it and made it into a sink. So I like doing little things like that. I also have a wheel light. I have another light that's done out of an oil filter. So these are little things that I do, and I'll give you guys a tour one day, but these are some of the fun stuff. I have a tire that is actually the mirror for the bathroom. So these are all the things that I enjoy doing, and I'm constantly looking for new ideas when it comes to this stuff. Okay, the next question comes from Derek Hartline. He said, would you do a video as if you're a customer? He'll be at the Marriott coming up in Atlanta, and he's never valet parked before. I've never used valet parking in a large city or large hotel, and I don't know what to expect. Please educate us if you've never valet parked before. See, it's my assumption, being in a big city, everyone's valet parked before, but obviously this industry doesn't exist in a lot of smaller towns or areas, so people have no idea what this is all about, or even in other countries what exactly it is. So let me give you a little rundown on what to do when you're valet parking. Number one thing, let's say you're driving a car, if you're in a rental car, you pretty much know your car, but at the same time, anywhere you go, a valet should inspect your car when they pull in, because what we're trying to do is determine if there's anything called pre-existing damage on the car, because if not, the valet company is going to be charged for that afterwards. Number two, remember, only give the driver's key. Do not give your additional keys. Do not give your house keys. Do not give your office keys. Only give the driver's key. That's very important. 1, 4, they are only responsible for that driver's key. Number two, if they do lose your keys, you're not losing the keys to your house, you're not losing the keys to your office. We've had worst case scenarios where a valet has lost a set of keys and a guy cannot get into his office the next day. And that turns into a nightmare, especially if you're dealing with commercial properties trying to pick the locks. So number 2, so only give your driver's key. Number 3, when you get, number 3, I'm going to say this one. Do not leave anything in your car that you don't want stolen or gone through. I'm not saying valets are thieves, but please, just through security, don't leave your purse in there. Don't leave your laptops. Don't leave that. Not that the valets are thieves, but we have other situations where wherever they park the car, once they park the car, the valet is limitedly liability. The valet company is limitedly liable for what's in that car. Now, if they put it in a very bad area, that's one thing. But if someone breaks the glass and steals a backpack, that's not the valet company's fault. That's your fault for not securing it. So when you get out of a car, do not leave anything exposed. If you can, put it in a trunk. If not, take it with you. Do not leave stuff in the car, especially in Atlanta. Atlanta, they will break into your car if they see anything. So please do not leave anything in your car. Take your keys, all the keys with you except for the driver's door. Inspect the car, and then on the way out, when the valet brings the car around, you take 60 seconds and walk around the car and make sure there's no more damage to that car that wasn't there before. So if you do those 3 or 4 things, that will make you safe. Now, how do you tip a valet? Depending on what kind of car you have, I say at the minimum a $5 tip. Whatever you're in, $5 tip is minimum. If you have a nicer car, I would do $10 in, $10 out. That way they keep your car up front. If it's a really exotic or something, I would do 20 in, 20 out. That's the least you can do. And honestly, they'll probably let you keep your key. So that's a minimum you could do. But $5 is more than respectable for any type of rental car, SUV, or anything like that. Now, if they give you incredible service, then you can go up from there. So we covered how to safeguard your keys, how to safeguard inside of your car, how to safeguard making sure there's no damage to the car, how to tip, and pretty much that's it. So don't be intimidated. Valets are just people too. You'll enjoy it. It'll be a great time. And I appreciate the questions. There's a ton more. We'll get into those into the next video.